Hi, everyone. I am just jumping in here real quick to introduce this episode because it's near and dear to my heart. While we are preparing for Kaylee's maternity leave, we're actually doing some replays of some episodes you may have forgotten about or that we think are going to be really powerful for people in this season. And this episode is our very first episode. And I just have to say, while I was editing this, I didn't realize that we had come so far, that we had changed so much. I remembered back to when we recorded this episode and the things I was thinking about and worrying about and feeling then and how I feel now. And I still think that this episode is so great. I forgot how great it was and how deep it was, especially as we get like more than halfway through and explaining what is the feminine and how does it affect us, and just these deep stories of who we are and how we came here. And so I hope that you will deeply enjoy this episode if you're re-listening to it, and try to get the nuggets out of it that you may have forgotten yourself. If you've been a listener from the beginning or even more recently, I would love for you to think about how you have changed since this episode dropped last October. How have you changed? How have you grown? And how has your knowledge of the feminine grown? So I really hope that you enjoy this, and we'll see you next week. Okay, enjoy.
Welcome to the Feminine Alchemy podcast, where we explore the truth about the feminine, the peaceful, the wild, and the visceral. I'm your host, Jaye Anne, joined by my co-hosts, Julie Dean Richards and Kayelee Rose. Each week, we explore the deep mysteries of the feminine and help listeners apply them to their daily lives in a practical way. Join us to unlock the hidden wisdoms your soul has been waiting for. Hello, welcome to my first episode of Feminine Alchemy. I am Jaye Anne, and I'm here with my two lovely co-hosts, Kayelee Rose and Julie Dean Richards. Say hi, ladies.
Hello.
Hi. So today we are going to talk about femininity. Just jump right in. We're not pulling any punches today. We are just going to talk about femininity and what it is, why it matters to us. And then you're going to hear a little bit about each of us and how we got into femininity in the first place. So, Kayelee, I'm going to have you go first because you have a lot of feminine energy and it's something that you have been formally trained in. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on femininity.
Okay, well, thank you, Jaye Anne. Femininity and the feminine can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. They're buzzwords that are getting thrown around a lot. And so there are a lot of people who are like, what the heck? What is this? What is like femininity? Is it frilly dresses? Is it like letting people tell me what to do all the time? Like, what is this? And for me, and in my experience, the feminine it's foundational to absolutely everything we experience. There is nothing without the feminine and the masculine. Nothing is created without both of those energies being involved. And we exist in a culture, at least I do, where the masculine tends to be prioritized and the feminine tends to be like, yeah, we don't talk about that. And the feminine gets painted as like not powerful, not important, or even evil sometimes. And to me, the feminine is yin energy. It's rest, it's darkness, it's gestation, it's receptivity and openness. And that energy is significant. It's integral to life being sustained and life being created. And whether that's the life of a human being or life of a plant or the life of a project or business, the feminine is crucial. And when we don't include the feminine in the continuation of any of those things, we get burnout and we get power over paradigm where somebody or something is trying to control or overpower or crush something else. If you look at the world, that doesn't go very well. that tends to be incredibly damaging. And so, yeah, for me, it just all boils back to everything is created from the feminine and the masculine.
That I love that. Do you feel like it's possible to have too much feminine? Like you just talked about over masculinized, but is there a hyper femininity and what does that look like to you?
I do believe that there can be a hyper femininity, and that can look like, so on a like human being interacting with other human beings level, that can look like expecting everybody else to take care of everything. It's kind of like princess energy of like, I'm just gonna lay here and eat bonbons and just be fine and let everything flow and everybody's gonna do everything for me. And that's kind of like a caricature, but that is this hyper feminine energy. It's too passive and too entitled almost. I'm not sure how else to phrase that. But yeah, to shorten that all down, yes, there is a hyper femininity to the hyper masculinity.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. And I think we'll talk about that a lot as well. Like I'm just seeing this concept of like all these passive people are just like, I don't want to worry about stuff as like a response to the hyper masculinity we've been experiencing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to these conversations unfolding. Julie, tell us about your perception on femininity and what it is to you, and then, you know, what's your connection to femininity other than obvious reasons.
Well, I think, just like Kaylee's laid out really beautifully, right? The feminine is that yin energy. And if we want to think about this in context of nature or opposites, if the masculine is the summer, the sun beating down, the brightness, the fullness of the heat, then the feminine is going to be more like the winter, the cooling off period, the rest period, cold. And I think a lot of women, when they hear that, when I was first learning about this and being like, why are women all the bad things? Like, why is the feminine energy, like, why is it cold? Like, everyone likes summer better than winter, right? Like, everyone loves it to be hot outside, not cold outside. I guess I can't say everyone's like that. There are people who would prefer to live in Minnesota or, in Canada, right? Who love the winter, who want to be in the snow all the time. But it is that without the darkness, there is no light. Without that resting time, we can't actually be replenished. There really is no summer without winter. There literally is no summer without winter. You couldn't do it. And we have big problems when we don't have a good winter. Like you'll hear farmers talk about this all the time. We didn't get enough moisture. We didn't get enough snow. Things aren't working because we don't have enough moisture. We don't have enough snow on the ground. If you have heat all the time, you get singed, you get burnt out. The crops can't grow. You need that cooling off period. I can't imagine what our life would be. People who live in Alaska, I have a dear friend who lives in Alaska, and there are times in Alaska where the sun never goes down, right? There's sun all the time, or there's dark all the time. And when you have the sun all the time, what do? It's hard to sleep. It throws off your circadian rhythm. It makes it difficult for you. You need that rest and relaxation time for yourself. And that's why the feminine is so important. But it's also the reason that we're so unfamiliar with it because we take it for granted. And just like we take the night for granted and we associate the night with all these things, people coming in, burglars, bad things happening at night, nothing good happens after midnight, all those kinds of things. We associate it that way because we're taking it for granted. We don't actually know it, and we don't want to know ourselves because we're so busy going, doing, and we don't take the time to rest, to meditate. Because I'll tell you the other things that are the feminine that are so important is that nurturing, the nourishing, the
Yeah.
meditation, right? Spiritual revelation in many ways is a very feminine thing because the feminine is the receiver. So she's here to receive. And she receives things like spiritual downloads. She receives things like wisdom for the tribe. She receives clarity, right? She sees the path. And the masculine does a great job of being the container for all of that to happen. It's the structure, it's the logic, but without something to fill the container, it's an empty container. And you need that beautiful flow. Think about water. Like, water is implicitly incredibly feminine, right? It will overflow. It is the most powerful force on the earth, right? Water is the most powerful force on the earth. And so that is the feminine, just like Kayelee was saying, as though, even though we think about it as passive, or we think about it as darkness, or those things that we don't like to associate with it, it actually is the most powerful force. But we have gotten so used to looking at the container and
Yeah.
building the container and making the pretty structures and being so busy, we don't want to reconnect to ourselves, that we have ousted the feminine in so many ways, which is why I'm so glad we're having these conversations, because I think most people literally do not know what the feminine is, and they literally do not know how to connect to their feminine selves, or even this idea of like, what does the feminine do? What do you do? Like, what is the power of the feminine? And I hope we can explore that in really practical ways. I am a legal professional by trade, hopefully a barred lawyer in the next month. And, that practicality piece of me, it's so important for this to be practical. And I think because the feminine is so ethereal, it is inherently so spiritual and so intuitive. I'm glad that we're shedding this light, and the hope of this podcast is to bring it down to a practical way. I know Kaylee's super good at that. I know Jaye Anne's super good at that, to help people really understand this and actually how to practically use it in their lives. So that's why it's important to me.
I love that. I love that so much. There's so many different aspects of the feminine that you just highlighted there, Julie, and just like beautiful. Thank you. So for me, my introduction to the feminine was originally like, femininity doesn't matter, being a girl is like fine or whatever, like girl power and feminism means you're as good as a boy. And I grew up, I was like, I'm as good as a boy. I'm as good as a boy. I'm going to go to school like a boy, and I'm going to kick their butts at everything except for athleticism, because I'm not like working that hard for sports, because I was not into it. But I would just be like, I'm going to do this stuff. I was on the Powder Puff football team, and I was like, yeah, this is fun. Then I graduated college and I had a baby, or I was pregnant. And I was like, how does one give birth as good as a man? And I was like, you don't. So I need to figure something else out here. And that's when I started into this whole foray of, it's good enough to be a woman. It's good enough to be feminine. And what does feminine mean? And what are the parts of the femininity that this skewed form of masculinity we've been dealing with has been mining for the value and leveraging and trying to like hold hostage as a way to hijack creativity, to hijack that creationary force? And what is that? And how do we take that back and just let that rest within our bodies and come back into that restful space? And so all of that to say, like, you can't give birth as good as a man. I'm sorry. It's not a thing.
A good podcast title.
That's true. But it was really empowering. It's so empowering to me to find that I'm good enough. I am good enough in my own femininity. And in fact, there's a whole there's a whole half of the world that exists that proves that I'm good enough. That is part of what I am part of, and that we've been just ignoring for a long time. All this nourishment and all this intuitivity, like that's where I went. I started with food, and then I went to nourishment or intuitive. So that's my, what is femininity to me? It's its own thing. And I've had to reverse engineer that for my own. And I don't think I'm alone. I think that a lot of people, especially who grew up when I grew up, millennial age-ish people, were taught like, you want to be good, you're good enough. And it was great, because the feminist movement was really important in bringing equality, but it was just we just need a different kind of equality now, just upgrading that. So Kayelee, why does the feminine matter?
Why does the feminine matter? So like I mentioned earlier, there is no creation of anything without the feminine and the masculine. And man, so I grew up in and still participate in a religious culture that like talks about the masculine God, and we call him Heavenly Father, but he also has a female companion who is equal to him, and we call her Heavenly Mother. And even though I had that background and like was taught that Eve was actually an enlightened, wonderful woman who made a courageous choice rather than foolish or misguided or beguiled, like a lot of people have been introduced to Eve with that language. Even though I had all of that, it still felt like something was missing because I could look through scripture. I could talk to all kinds of people and read scriptural texts of other religions, even, and I could see the masculine God. I could see my father, my heavenly father there. But it was really hard for me to see the divine feminine, to see the mother God. And as a woman, I was like, well, God can't show me how to be because he is a man. I can only be so much like him. Like that was my perspective. And so I didn't intentionally embark on a journey of discovering the divine feminine, but like deep in my soul, there was this desire to know the divine feminine and to know my own femininity because I was burning out trying to be masculine and do all the things. And that is one reason why the feminine is so important, is that like we do burn out if we're just running masculine or primarily running masculine energy, especially as women, as female bodies that are designed to run more feminine energy than masculine energy. And so if you think about the concept of like burning the candle at both ends, like you're staying up late and you're like getting up early and you're really focusing on productivity. That's all very, very masculine. Productivity and accomplish and do and prove and go out and get. And if you do that for long enough, your body is going to break down. Your mind is going to break down. That rest, that night, like Julie was talking about earlier, that we don't connect with sleep and we don't connect with night and we don't want to go there because it's like unknown and unfamiliar. But we have to go there for rejuvenation. We have to go there for healing. And if we don't go there, yeah, we start falling apart. And if we look at our social structures, some of them are falling apart because they don't have a balance of masculine and feminine energy. And if we look at the natural world, if we look at the seasons, if we look at how plants grow, like in a snippet of time, it can look like an ecosystem is just shot. It's burnt out, it's ruined. And it's sometimes because we've been messing with it because we don't understand everything. But if we watch that ecosystem over a period of time, it repairs itself. It adjusts, it adapts, and it requires that feminine, like below the surface type of work. I think of it like gestational work. You look at a woman who's pregnant, and on the outside, it doesn't look like she's up to a lot. But on the inside, there is so much going on. And even when we're in a rest phase, even when the land is dormant in winter, there is a lot going on beneath the surface. It's not productive work, it's more like reproductive work. But that doesn't necessarily mean birthing babies, though it can. It's this regenerative work, this inner work of like the death and rebirth cycle. And for me, in my own life and experience, it was reconnecting with the divine feminine, reconnecting with my heavenly mother that brought me out of some really dark places, like horrible betrayal trauma, like depression to the point of suicidal ideation. Like those are things that brought me to my knees, and I found the mother god there, the goddess. And I need her, and I need her masculine companion to create things in my life, to move forward. And I need that masculine and feminine energy within myself. But until I began to connect with both and to recognize those two energies within myself and in the world around me, I was living my life very much out of balance. and I was hurting and I was hurting other people. And not that I'm perfect now, because I'm totally not, but I am more in balance than I used to be. I experience greater peace. I allow myself to rest. And so then when I am productive, I am more productive is not the right way to say it, but I am intentionally productive. There's a quality of like, this is the work. This is the good work instead of just, I'm doing stuff because I have to do stuff. So that felt a little tangential, but that is why the feminine is important to me.
I love that visual of like, I do remember before I even had been pregnant, seeing pregnant ladies walking by, and they're just this peaceful, whatever, or they're just sitting and like, then one day I was pregnant and I was in the middle trimester, and this baby is just going all over the place. And I was like, what peace did they have? Like, where did the peace come? Like, whoa, hold on. There's so much going on under the surface, and I'm exhausted. There's so much happening. Wow. And they're just externally, though, everyone's like, oh, yeah, everything's great, whatever. Yeah. No, that under the surface work is so powerful. Yeah. Julie, why does it matter to you? And why is this such important work for you?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts swirling in my head, and I was gonna say something about wounds, but I have a feeling, Jaye Anne, you'll say something about wounds in a minute. But
No idea.
what came to mind was it matters because whatever you put into your shadow will will come out as a distortion of who you are. And what I mean by that, because there may be people incredibly unfamiliar with this concept of shadow work or doing those things, but there's this idea that when you're young, especially, and it can happen anytime, but specifically when you're younger, right? And in between 1 and 7, 1 and 8, when someone tells you that you've done something wrong, or there's a trait about you that's wrong, or they point out something that's really bad, quote unquote wrong, someone might tell you, like for me, my short experience with this that was really in my shadow was a woman called me a liar. She said that I was really young and I had gone to a place I wasn't supposed to go, but I didn't know that because I was so little. I didn't know I was supposed to be in that space. And she said, "Are you allowed to be here?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm allowed to be here." Just being a 5-year-old, like thinking like, "Yeah, I'm allowed to be here." And she came back later and said, "You're a liar." She told me I was a liar. And when we have those pivotal experiences, when someone says that about us, right? Or maybe somebody says, "You're too loud. You talk too much. You do too much." Whatever it is. They will say something, or "You're incapable of this," or "You're lazy." We take that trait and we throw it into our shadow. And when we throw it into our shadow, right, what I mean by that is we really repress it. We're afraid that that's true about ourselves. And so we throw it in our shadow. And oftentimes we look at other people and we spot those traits. And we'll find that later in our lives, that, we get really triggered or angry about people who have specific traits like that. Like, let's say someone called you were lazy when you were a kid, right? And then when you grow up, you're like, "Oh, people are so lazy. That person's so lazy and it makes me so angry that they're so lazy." Or, you look at somebody else, or like for me, right? One of the things was like, be honest with me. Don't lie to me. Like, do not lie to me. That's like a huge thing. Integrity is a huge deal to me. Be integrous, have integrity. And when that happens, when we throw things into our shadow, we start to judge them. But we can never truly hide the shadow. We'll judge, we'll point our fingers at other people. This is basically, right, like in the Bible, what Jesus says, take the beam out of your own eye, whatever you're judging, maybe that thing is in you, right? And how that applies to the feminine, though, is when we stuff stuff into our shadow, when we are afraid of the parts of us that are not pretty. And I would say the feminine has been stuffed into the shadow because, I mean, going back to the feminist movement, right, which was good. So for many things, like there was a purpose to it, and it was helpful for equality of rights and getting women out of the shadow. But what did the feminist movement teach us? Being a woman is bad. In many ways, that's what it taught us. Being a woman is bad. If you're not like a man, you don't have worth. If you don't do what a man does, then you don't have worth. You can't stay home with children, you won't have worth. And so what has happened is we've come into this twisted reality because of that, because we suppress and we suppressed and we've suppressed the feminine for so long into our shadow that it comes out in twisted and distorted ways, right? And we can't help it. One thing, like for example, if we want to take a classic example, if we think about like sexuality, right? And making sex a bad thing. So for so many cultures, so many people, sex is evil, sex is bad, whatever it is, sex is terrible. When we put that into our shadow for so long, that now we have issues with things like big time porn addictions, right? We have issues with pedophilia. We have issues coming out where we get this twisted distortion behind the walls of closed doors that come out, or like we get anger issues. We get issues in our marriages, and it's because we're not willing to acknowledge those parts of ourselves that we have labeled bad, that we've labeled as not good, that we've put into our shadow. And so in that way, the feminine has been in the shadow. She has been repressed for so long. And now our world is twisting and we can see it. We can see it, just the divide, everything that's happening. So many women don't know where they're going, what they can do. So many mothers who want to stay home with their kids feel like they can't. So many women who are working feel guilty for being for working. It goes both ways, and women are just burnt out. They're just so burnt out. They have everything on their shoulders. We've created this twisted distortion. And so we need to acknowledge our shadow now. We have to take the feminine out of the shadow. We have to examine her. We have to see her. And if we see her and fully put her on as ourself, we will bring balance back to the world. And that's like my macro level. Maybe that sounds like audacious to say that like we'll fix the world by doing this, but in many ways, we will bring the world back. If you want to bring the world back into balance, you have to bring the feminine back. And that's just the truth. We have to take her out of our shadow. So that's why it's important. Just saving the world. No big deal.
No biggie.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
So, as you were talking, Julie, I just had the thought come into my mind like, this work is important for men too.
Yes.
Because men, when they repress their feminine, when boys are told it's not safe to, like, you can't cry.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Men don't cry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not okay for boys to be nurturing, and they're not allowed to connect with their emotions. You grow up, and then you have men who cannot relate to other human beings without either shutting down and running away or attacking.
Yeah.
And you have men who feel like they have no purpose.
Yeah.
Because the women are doing everything that I thought maybe I needed to do. So do I just coast? Do I just do nothing? Do I feel bad about myself? Because like the repression of the feminine is damaging to all genders, all people.
Yes.
And the reclamation and reintegration of the feminine is vital and life-giving to all people.
Yeah, and I want to make a comment too about how this affects men in that then like exactly what Kayelee was saying, I would call that men are starting to self-feminize themselves, right? And that's where you get these, so many women complain. I know so many women who complain, all my husband does is sit on the couch and play video games all day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He doesn't do anything. And so I have, and then the solution always ends up being, so I have to do it.
Yeah.
I do everything, right? I pick up the slack, and then it becomes this cycle, right, of women doing the masculine and then men self-feminizing and feeling like, exactly like Kayelee said, they don't have a purpose. They don't know where they're going. But on the other side, they get the other end of the stick where it's like, don't show your emotions, don't nurture, right? And there just has to be this balance brought back to help women and men and our children really have that, so that they can see these examples and grow up and not feel all of these same things, not have this imbalance really infecting them. So yeah, thanks for saying that, Kayelee. It affects both genders so much.
Yep. I don't have anything to add to that. Those are all the thoughts. I was just gonna say that about the men with the women who do complain, like my husband just sits on the couch and plays video games. That is 100% repressed feminine energy. that needs to come forward on both sides. That balance needs to come back. And so it's not just about, you know, men just being masculine. It's also about men being okay with their femininity and being confident in their totality of who they are. And I mean, that's for all of us. That's what all of this is about, right? That's why we do any of this work with energy healing and astrology. And all of this stuff is just for funsies if we're not actually using it to become ourselves. And the whole point is to just fully step into your full self and not be afraid to do that. Or even if you are afraid, step through the fear and recognize it's okay to cry. Even though I'm afraid to cry, even though I was told it's not okay to cry, I can cry. Or even for women, the big emotion that gets repressed at a young age is anger.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to be angry, even though I'm afraid that I'm going to look like a bratty child. It's okay to be angry. Or even though I'm afraid that, you know, all those things, like it's okay to be angry. It's fully okay to feel anger. And yeah, it's for everybody. All of these emotions are for everybody. And the femininity is for everybody. But taking the feminine out of the shadow, like Julie said, is 100% a big piece of the key to reshifting our entire energy globally. Yes.
Yeah. Can I do have a particular question for you, Jaye
Mm-hmm.
Anne. On this subject, because I'm feeling like a little bit like this episode, right, is almost like a prequel to everything we'll talk about, just little pieces here and there that we're going to
Yeah.
dive deep in. And so I would love for you to, talking about women specifically, I think men have this too, but going a little bit into your feelings about, sometimes the repression of the feminine leads to certain types of wounds. Like we talk about the witch wound, and if you'd explain a little bit of that and what that has to do with the feminine and why it has such a scary name, the witch wound, where that comes from.
So the witch wound, like Cliff's Note version, witch wound comes from across the globe. First and foremost, it happens independently and has happened in all cultures. The main witch wound that most people are talking about when we're discussing the witch wound is a time in Europe during the Dark Ages for about 400 years. It's not clear how long it was, and it's not clear how many women were burned at the stake, but was a long period of time over several hundred years. It's estimated I think it was between 200 and 400,000 women were burned at the stake over the course of hundreds of years, right? And so now you have multi-generational oppression. So people were living, and their grandmother and their grandmother and their grandmother knew that you don't do these certain things or else you will be tortured and killed. Okay, and so this is a multi-generational fear, and what it effectively did was sever us from our connection to the earth. Then, and this was all in the name of Christianity, right? So then when we westernized individuals moved to the Americas, we still brought the wounds of that with us, and we have this disconnection with the new land that we're in. And so we have this beautiful, not so beautiful space of, it's just ripe of feminine repression. This is how the feminine became shoved into the shadow, because it was not safe to be feminine. The main pieces of, they were attacking all levels of femininity connection. They encouraged women to betray each other. They would say like, oh, we're not going to torture you as much, or we won't kill you if you just tell us who else is in on this. So the betrayal wound is a huge one for women, and that's why we get catty and we get mean to each other and we get overly competitive. The other piece is understanding anything to do at all about herbs. Being smart is a witch wound. So if a woman could read, they would be like, she might be a witch. Owning land at all. Many times the reason for a woman being burned at the stake wasn't because they actually thought she was like damaging society. They just wanted whatever land she was taking up. So they would burn her at the stake so that way they could get her land. This is why women struggle with money, and why we have all these money wounds and being seen and being prominent, because if you're prominent and not playing along, then you are in danger, right? This is again, because it was a multi-generational wound, it has been passed down in a huge chunk to everyone who either was born of that culture or also impacted by that culture. And westernized culture is global now. It's all over, and you can't just like, you can't put the cat back in the bag.
So to summarize a little bit like what you're saying about this, right, for people who may not understand what a multi-generational wound looks like, we know, coming at this from a scientific perspective, we know through epigenetics and many things that our genes literally carry the wounds of our ancestors. We carry their
Yes.
stress, we carry their emotions. And so the idea with the witch wound is, and we can see this in animals. This is part of the reason that animals know where to go. They know how to migrate. They know how to do things that their parents did. We always say, like, oh, it's just their instinct. Well, their instinct is the impressions of seven generations back that was impressed upon them. And so we can follow people from different cultures and we can scientifically see that they carry these certain attitudes and things like that because it's imprinted on their DNA, very literally. And so what Jaye Anne is saying is that during this time when we had this big burning of women who were being called witches, it wasn't just women. There are some men who were burned also. And some people, there's lots of different methods that people died, but usually burning. And that impression, made a big global impression on many, many women and men in this idea of I have to play small, don't get burned, don't get
Yeah.
hurt. And we can see this in other cultures. And I think we see this even that this wound was such a big deal, but it's a wound on top of a wound, which really starts much more anciently than that, which is, the usurping of matriarchal societies that we can see, in Brazil, in different places around the globe. But this is probably the most recent big part of that. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
clarify that for people who didn't understand where it was coming from.
Yeah, thank you. So there's two parts to it. One is cultural, like what are the things, the values that you're passing down verbally and just kind of like doing and that you're saying is okay. And the other is this epigenetic piece. The epigenetic piece feels like I have a lot of women who I work with who are people in general. You're right. Like it wasn't just women who were burned. I have a lot of people in general who are like, I know, I know there is like some sort of deep wisdom that I'm supposed to know. There's something deeper that I'm supposed to understand, and I just didn't get it. And I don't know what that is, and I don't know how to find it. And it's really elusive. And that's when you're about to embark on a feminine journey. That's what the epigenetic piece feels like. But everything that you've been taught, and this is the cultural side, is like, oh, for example, like, oh, crystals are bad, right? Tarot cards are evil, right? Tarot cards were the wisdom that they were passing around at the time, and they were like, oh no, they're just playing cards. So, but that is, tarot cards are really important to the feminine and understanding like a journey. So that's what I wanted to say too. So thank you for clarifying that. There's two pieces here. One is like it's just considered to be evil in the culture to explore these feminine things because of those witch burnings. But also there's this epigenetic feeling of like I feel disconnected from the land, and I know I have this like drive to go gather, and that's why we go shopping. And it's not just like, oh, women go shopping because they're fancy and pretty. No, women are kind of wired to go gather herbs to make medicine. Thank you very much for asking that.
Oh, yeah, no problem. And it just shows there are so many, as we've talked about, just so many pieces of this feminine and how it's been repressed, including this idea of money, which I know we'll have many episodes about that later. But money really is a feminine energy if we think about it. Money itself is feminine. The use and distribution and keeping and guarding of money is masculine. And so many women are afraid to have money, cultural thing, but it really is, all these taboo topics are part of the feminine, which is a big part of like what we're trying to unearth here. And yeah, so sorry to cut you off and and all of those things. But I just wanted to open it up if Kayelee had any thoughts about this because you haven't had a chance to chat.
Yeah, so I'm really grateful that you asked that question, Julie. Like you asked Jaye Anne to talk about wounds and the witch wound in particular, because like it is real. Like it is a visceral thing within us. Like even hearing it spoken about, I had physical sensations in my body of like clenching and like, oh, ugh. Even though I know about these things and I've worked on these things, there are definitely times when I get tripped up where I'm afraid to show up in the online space and talk about what I'm doing because I might get burned at the stake, even though I don't actually think I'll get burned at the stake. On some level, there's still some healing around like, no, 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 no. Like it is safe. And part of why it's a struggle is that it can be a little unsafe in that there may be people who really don't like what you have to say when you show up talking about these feminine things. But with that fear, my I have a favorite quote that I return to very, very frequently. And then there's a quote that my husband shared with me just yesterday. And I'll start with that one. I don't remember who it's by. I'll have to try to find who this quote came from. But it's fear is a mile wide and an inch deep. As we are learning about the feminine together on this podcast, as we are exploring these things and sharing wisdom, fear is a mile wide and an inch deep. We are not going to drown in the fear. And then on the other side of that is a quote by Joseph Campbell that is, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And that right there encapsulates the work that I do. And I think it really lines up with the work that you two do, where there is this sense of like the things that we feel are missing in the world, the things that like that wisdom that we just can't quite reach. It's scary to go there. It's scary to go into that cave, that unknown, that darkness that has been classified as evil, but darkness is not evil. It's not inherently evil. Something could be lurking there, but darkness itself is the void, which is also the womb, which is the safe space to become what we are intended to be. And in there lies the treasure that we're seeking, the wholeness, the peace, the sense of I am enough as I am, and I am more than enough as I am. And a connection to the earth, feeling like we actually belong here and also belong beyond here. That's all in the cave, and that's all the treasure that we're seeking as we discuss these topics.
Beautiful.
You gave me chills.
So this was a great segue into the next part of our conversation. Kayelee, tell us about your work and what you do and how you got into it, and a little short. Oh, and if everyone could talk about their religious upbringing, cultural background, and like how that informed how you are today, who you are today, and sort of where you are now, that would, I think, be really powerful as well.
Okay. I will try to remember everything that you just asked for. So I am an astrologer and a somatic educator. I do a whole lot of things. And I weave them all together to support people in creating, fostering an internal sense of safety and belonging and connection so that they can show up in the world with greater creativity and courage and intention. It's doing the inner work so that the outer work is more refined almost. And so I primarily I focus on the sun and the moon, but especially the moon and the archetypal energy and the symbolism of the moon, and drawing in things like breath work and connecting to our bodies, body work, somatics, interwoven with astrological principles. And I came to all of this I love learning and I love gathering information and I love integrating it together and then sharing it with other people. And I've had a lot of experiences in my life where I was having some sort of crisis. Like I mentioned previously, experiencing betrayal trauma, becoming suicidal, things like that, that it was like, I cannot do this with the information that I currently have. And it's becoming life or death. I have to seek greater knowledge. I have to seek greater wisdom. And for me, my religious and spiritual background informed how I approached those crisis moments. So I grew up in the LDS church, so the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I'm still a member. I was introduced very early to the concept of, hey, there's a Heavenly Father and a Heavenly Mother, and hey, Eve was actually really awesome. And I've identified with Eve from a very young age. I've been like obsessed with her my whole life, and obsessed with Persephone, which she is kind of a type and a shadow, not shadow in the sense of like the shadow, but shadow like an echo, I guess you could say, of the Eve archetype. And wow, I'm losing my train of thought because I'm getting so excited about what I'm talking about. But all of that, and then my experiences, like I'm also an artist, and I learned a lot about symbolism and the power of symbols and images, and incorporating all those things together, and that understanding of like, hey, I am the offspring of deity. That means that I matter, even though there's some part of me that thinks I don't. Why is there that disconnection? And what do I do to fix that? And for me, it was leaning into feminine energy, learning about the feminine, allowing myself to rest, reconnecting with my body. Because one of the byproducts, I guess, of the repression of the feminine is disconnection from our bodies as well as from the earth. Because matter, physicality is a very feminine thing. And so reconnecting with my body and having my body not be taboo, having it be a beautiful thing that isn't just a tool for my spirituality, but is a vital part of my spirituality. Learning that was incredibly healing. And I was led to led to that exploration of the body combined with the exploration of intuition through like a combination of inspiration, like what I would call divine inspiration, and a study of astrology. It was like, hey, Kayelee, guess what? The time is ripe. Excuse me, my voice is trying to go away. The time is ripe to reconnect with your body more fully. And then I went and did a couple of certifications, like becoming a somatic educator and doing body mapping and breath work and things like that. And that's, in a lot of ways, crisis is what brought me to the feminine. And now I'm in a phase of life where I'm learning how to learn and grow and be more fully integrated and whole through pleasure and play instead of pain and hard and this is a crisis, because it doesn't always have to be painful. It doesn't always have to be a dark night of the soul. So yeah, did I cover everything that you asked?
Definitely. I loved it.
Jaye Anne, I'm gonna
Yeah.
ask that you go next because
Sure.
for some reason my computer's not charging, so I have to fix that while you chat.
Yeah, so I'm Jaye Anne. I've been doing energy work largely on myself for about 12 years. Well, first on myself, and then in about 2015, so I guess that was what, 9 years ago, gosh. It just kind of struck me. I was like, oh, I can help other people with this. And I've been through this journey for a long time of like, I need someone else to tell me that it's okay for me to do this. And I didn't need that. What I just needed to do was do it. So the more I started to do it, the more my clients started to see results, which just baffled me. But so I'm also an astrologer. So I practice something I call functional astrology, where I go into the individual points and we just energetically clear out anything that is like blocking or any like terrible patterns that are just not serving you. Like that's kind of just what I do with people's charts. And yeah, it's just wild, the crazy things that happen for that. So anyways, I grew up non-denominational Christian. I've never been part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but I end up being very close to many of them. And so people just often like lump me in because I have a similar energy of just like, hi. And So I've always had friends in that faith, but I did not grow up that way. And I grew up in a church where Mary was not somebody we talked about. Mary, my mom would be like, oh, Catholics worship Mary, and it's like terrible. And that is a bad thing. And I just was like, okay, so Mary's bad, and the feminine is nothing. And so that was, I had to pull my femininity out of my shadow. And that was a big part of my kind of wake up call to from during the early days of motherhood. And I'm not a practicing Christian right now. I don't consider myself Christian. I believe in that Jesus did important things. I can't be part of a religious structure. And that has a lot to do with why I'm here. I'm not here to serve in that way. And if you saw my chart, you'd be like, oh, yes, there are certain things in there that are like, yeah, you're not here for that, which is fine. But I hold space for anyone of any faith in any kind of circumstance to just fully become themselves, right? And use what we have energetically, all of the resources on the planet that we have available to us, whether it be through divine wisdom, through gods and goddesses, whether it be through Christ himself, whether it be through, angels or fairies or whatever it is. We're here to use all of these to grow and enhance and flourish. And that's really what I'm here to do, is to help people find their own medicine and really deep dive into their own medicine, whatever that looks like. So that is my background. And let's see what I do. I do it because I just want people to be happy. Honestly, I really just want people to be happy. And like what we were talking about here, if you're talking about biggest bang for the buck, it's not about childhood wounds and it's femininity. Those are the things that are just going to get you the biggest bang for your buck, because most people are dealing with them and it's impacting a huge way. If you want to start with mindset and forcing beliefs into your mind, you're not going to get as much effective emotional sense of well-being as you will working with pulling your femininity out of the shadow. And that's the harder sell. But you're going to get way more results that way. So, but buy this book, listen to these 16 affirmations and your life will change. Yeah, I could sell 1 million of those, but I wouldn't help anybody. And so what I really want is to help people really step into themselves. And so let's jump into femininity. So
I do think, Jaye Anne, you should mention that you don't come from a very feminine place. I mean, you talked about that, like your mother, talking about Mary, but your career has not been a feminine career by any until recently,
true.
by any stretch of the imagination. So if you could elaborate on that, that would be great.
Yeah. Thank you. Because when I'm talking about these things, I often glaze over that because oh, it's not relevant, but it's super relevant. I have a degree in biology. I went to chiropractic school, and then I went on to, I didn't finish chiropractic school because I was like, I have to start a whole business. And I was like, I couldn't wrap my head around it. So I left there and I started working for a financial planner. And I did all of his Excel spreadsheets and reporting and blah, blah, blah for $1 million clients. And they were like, here's the stuff I brought you from China, Jaye. And I was like, oh, thank you. They go on these world travels and bring me back goodies. It was great, but it was not a very feminine friendly place. So then I went into lab bench research, and I worked for a very influential organization. And I was dissecting flies. I literally just took their brains out of their fly. I stuck it in a dish and whatever. It was fun, but it was boring. Boring really fast. And so since I left there in 2014. So since then until recently, I've worked in insurance. So I've always been one foot in the biology world and one foot in the finance world. I've worked in insurance for a long time, selling insurance, working on systems in insurance, and helping people understand their finances and how finances work, and making all the math numbers do the things. It was my favorite. And the best thing I could do was come from a feminine place and breathe that femininity into the workplace where I was and do the masculine work in a feminine way and just be like, confident about it. And that would make a lot of change, but you can only do so much. And my true calling is to help people in a even more feminine way. So yes, thank you. I have a long career of very masculinized work in a highly male dominated place, doing a lot of analytics because that's something I'm comfortable. I just have a lot of air in my chart. So Julie, is your laptop working?
Yes, my laptop's
Okay.
working. We're good.
Tell us about you. Why are you here? What are you doing here? What do you do? And what brought you to this place?
Right. So I'm also an astrologer. I'm a Hellenistic and locational astrologer. My specialty is in timing techniques and doing a little bit more of the esoteric stuff. But I didn't start this way either, just like Jaye Anne. Definitely did not. I actually just graduated law school. I took the bar, hopefully passed. We'll see. I probably just won't tell anyone if I didn't. No. I been doing legal work for the past 4 years and 5 years, I guess now. But before that, I worked in research for 7 years. I was consulting high touch clients similar to Jaye Anne. I was doing more the high level research of how do you put this study together? How do we help it? And working with clients like Google, but also Harvard, Yale, Stanford, people like that, telling them how to do their research. So also not a very feminine space before this. But, I grew up in a home like Kayelee, poor Jaye Anne, she's like surrounded by these people who come from the LDS church, like all of us over here. But I grew up in a home that was LDS and I still go to church also. However, my home, I had a lot of exposure to other religions growing up. And part of that was I was an exchange student in Japan for a year. I actually speak 5 languages. Japanese is one of them. And I went and lived in Japan by myself for a year. I learned a lot about Buddhism. I learned a lot about, Shintoism, all those kinds of things, and really felt some power there. I have lived in India also and explored Hinduism. I've been able to, meditate with monks and do some really cool things, work in orphanages in the middle of Delhi, and that was a really great experience. But growing up, I also had a brother-in-law who was pagan. I had a pagan brother-in-law and I had my niece who's more like my sister. Actually, we're closer in age. Her mother-in-law is a witch. Like she's a witch. She went to actual witch school and she is, I guess if you want to use this term, Wiccan. There not everyone who's a witch is Wiccan, just so people know that, but not everybody does. And so growing up with an ex-brother-in-law, of course my family always talked about, being pagan. It was always a joke, like he's a pagan tattoo artist, like, this guy who we have around here. But we were always trying to be kind and talk to him and be, friendly as much as you can with someone who's an ex-brother-in-law. But he was more like my brother. I grew up with him. I didn't really know anything about what he worshiped or what he believed until more recently. And when my niece married into a family where that was also pagan, right? Her best friend, she married her best friend's older brother. And that is the woman who is a witch and who, practices Wiccanism. She, I had known about her my whole life. I'd always liked her. I'd always thought she was so fascinating. I was always the kid who was like in the grass, like pretending to make potions and like loved Harry Potter and like telling everyone I was gonna heal everything. I was always that person pretending I had superpowers. And so I one day was able to sit down and have a legitimate 2 or 3 hour conversation with her just to ask her about her beliefs, just to see what they were like. And, as someone who is a Christian and who does believe in Christ and Christ consciousness, I think a lot of people are afraid to do that. They're very fearful to ask, and they make a lot of assumptions about what it means to be pagan and what it means to be Wiccan. They make huge assumptions, and I just wanted to know. I literally was just curious. I just wanted to know. And, surprise, surprise, that so many things about their religion are not so different than other religions. Just like there's so many things about Hinduism that are also similar. So many things about Buddhism that are also so similar. And for me, it was so helpful in helping me to weave some threads. And the reason I choose this example of being Wiccan is because I do think it's one of the most matriarchal religions that we have left. Is, the belief in Maiden Mother Crone. They believe in a triple goddess. For people who don't know, they believe in it rather than a trinity. They have a triple goddess, but they also have various traditions about a god dying for them and the association between that and Samhain, or the Halloween time. And they have so many things that are so fascinatingly feminine. And this came at a perfect time for me because I was in law school. This is like the very beginning. I'd already started this journey a little bit. I'd already started exploring the feminine with my pregnancies, just like Jaye Anne. I'd already been kind of knee deep in that kind of stuff. But when I started law school, it was like it got turned up for me 50 notches. I don't know if it was needing to balance out all that masculine energy of being in a system that is incredibly masculine, but it was like all of a sudden the feminine mattered, and it mattered. And I felt like I had Heavenly Mother, I had the Mother God, the goddess, speak to me personally and say, hey, this is something you need to know now, right? This is the time for you to weave these threads. This is the time for you to come here. And so I started to explore and learn as much as I could. Was already an astrologer at this point and had been practicing for a while. I was already an herbalist. I was a doula, right? I do all these things. I'm a free birther, and I'd had births at home, and that was a huge part of my journey. But, this final piece of, okay, you've done all these things. Now let's really figure this out. And that's kind of what's led me here is, okay, in the words of the goddess to me, daughter, we have a lot of work to do, right? Daughter, we have a lot of work to do, and I need you to do this work for me. And that's why I'm here. Sorry if that was muddled.
Oh, no, that's great. It was really wonderful. Well, beautiful. So let's go around and just one thing that we want everyone to remember as we sign up, and just as a way to close it out, to say, what is one thing that you've if somebody never watched or listened to another episode again, what do you want them to come away with?
I can start. I'll start with this.
Please do.
I'll start while everyone's thinking. I would just say, I guess the two words I'd say is it's worth it and it matters. It's worth it and it matters. Finding out about the feminine is worth it and it matters, no matter what else comes your way, and that it will change your life. I promise you, it will change your life. And this is part of you. Don't be afraid. I mean, Kayelee read that beautiful quote about fear and everything. Don't be afraid about stepping into your power, because it's worth it and it matters. So that would be my short thought.
Honestly, like what's standing out to me most right now, like if nobody, like if people didn't watch or listen to anything else, like those two quotes that I shared. Fear is a mile wide and an inch deep, and the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And to echo Julie, this work is worth it. It is so worth it. And it's like coming home. It's like coming home to yourself and to the home you always wanted, but didn't know you wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. For me, I think I want everyone to know, like, you're inherently valuable and you are loved by the divine. Even if you don't feel like a person loves you, like, you are worthy of love. You are worthy of feeling comfortable, feeling safe in your skin. And once you get there, like, you're worth doing the work. It's just so wonderful. Well, thank you so much for watching or listening. We'll be on next week. Have a great day. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. Please make sure to give us a 5-star rating wherever you are listening and share with someone you know. See you next week.